This Jeep's a long way from home. It's from New York, and now it's out here in the Nevada desert. Ironically, my parents are from New York a long time ago, 50 years ago. So this Jeep has an LT1. It'll be going back to the East Coast with the most awesome of engines, in my opinion. It's got a 10-speed transmission. I do believe we're running the rock rails on this one, the coolers. So even though it's hot out here today, it hasn't even run warm. We are sailing up the parkway effortlessly in another LT1 10-speed. These engines really aren't under any stress in a JK. They just have so much torque on the bottom end that even cruising up a relatively steep grade at 60-70 miles an hour is effortless. We're running in 10th gear at 2,000 RPM. I'm not sure how much more we can say about the LT1. There's all sorts of other engine conversions and power adders out there, but really there's nothing like the LT1. And when I say the LT1, that also applies to some of the other LT engines like the L86 and to some extent the L83. There's obviously more powerful engines like the LT4 and the Hellcats. But if you look at the overall package of the LT1 with a 10-speed, it's hard to beat. When you look at the economy, the drivability, the power, there's just nothing else out there, in my opinion, that matches it. We're running a pure GM powertrain, engine, transmission, controllers, wiring, software. There is no hokey pokey hacking and patching and using adapters to connect things together. A full control of the operating system. That means if you want to put a blower on it, you want to tune it with HP tuners, EFI Live, or whatever, that's all available to you. As far as integrating the GM powertrain into the Jeep Wrangler, it's pretty routine for us now. And in the beginning, there was a steep learning curve. There was just so many ways to do things and so many things to do that settled on what we felt was the best combination. So we settled on using a pure GM powertrain. Now, we were doing Hemi work back when we started to work on the LS, but I grew up on GM powertrains, and yeah, I grew up through the muscle car era, and I have Chryslers and I have Fords, but bang for your buck, performance-wise, you're not going to beat the GM powertrain. The small block Chevy, in the day, you could build a small block Ford or a small block Chrysler, but it was going to cost you a lot more. But that's not to say that any of the other ways weren't good. The Hemi conversion was good. We had issues in the early days with the Hemis because the transmissions were so bad and they would overheat. But of course, that has gotten better over the years. But now that we're into the GM powertrains, just look at these things. 10-speed, direct injection. They're just amazing powertrains. And it doesn't matter what you put it in. I've seen them in Jaguars. I've seen them in pickup trucks. I've seen them in Hummers, and just transform any vehicle regardless of the weight into something that's fun to drive. You know, if we look at the JL, Chrysler has done a really good job upping the performance in the Wrangler JL and the JT. Remember, it wasn't that long ago that the TJs and the YJs, these things had 4-cylinder engines, 6-cylinder engines putting out well under 200 horsepower. And Mopar's philosophy of just having enough power to get to the trail, and then you didn't need a lot of power on the trail, was working. But when they came out with the 4-door JK, that all changed because now they built essentially a 4-door live axle SUV. Guys wanted to use it for expedition, guys wanted to load their families in it and cross the country, and that left the little V6 woefully lacking. So that opened up an entire market of Jeep engine performance. Performance in the Wrangler JK, in my opinion, was never 100%. Maybe with the stock tires and the light JK, the Pentastar with a 5-speed was okay. But most guys mod their Jeeps. They go up to 35s, 37s, armor and all that, and then the Pentastar just started to lose it. And a lot of that was the same reason the 3.8 lost it, was because they were running inefficient transmissions. So when the JL, Chrysler started to step up technology just like everybody else, and they went to the 8-speed transmission, which helped the Pentastar tremendously. They lightened the vehicle up a bit, and the JL runs a lot better, in my opinion, than the JK. And for a lot of customers, it's enough. It's enough to haul their JK in 35s, maybe 37s up the mountains, loaded down. Now, my experience and the feedback that I get is when you get up to 40s, 42s, you're towing a trailer, you're up at altitude. I do a lot of highway driving, and I see these JLs and these JTs, some of them towing, struggling going up some of these grades, especially at high altitude. So while the Pentastar 8-speed JL is an excellent combination for most people. I still think some guys have the need for even more power, whether it's towing at high altitude or just want to have fun. It's not as critical as a JK, but it's definitely there. Now let's take the 8-speed JL a step further and go into the LT. Now we have a 10-speed transmission that's extremely strong. It's not just good for 350 foot-pounds of torque, it's good for a lot more than that. We have a 11.5-to-1 compression V8 with direct injection and continuous variable valve timing. And that's huge. And that essentially gives this engine some of the characteristics of a diesel. Now, it's not a diesel, but it has a lot of the diesel characteristics. That bottom end torque that the LT has now become legendary for. You have to experience it for yourself, giving it throttle and moving the vehicle rather than revving up the motor and then moving the vehicle. Once you get used to it, you don't want to go back to anything else. 3 years ago when I was driving up this road, I had a lot of ambiguity with the LTs, especially with the 8-speed transmissions. Today I drive up this road and I say, after doing dozens and dozens of these things, there is nothing better. And I'm going to say this again, one of the big advantages that we have with the LT powertrain, the way we run it, is we run it the way GM runs it. So we have the same positives and negatives that GM sees. When GM was having problems with their 8-speed transmission and drivability, we had problems with our 8-speed transmissions and drivability. When GM came out with a fabulous 10-speed and it was dialed in out of the box, we bolted them in vehicles and it was dialed in out of the box. Having the ability to update your software or put a performance tune in it or bolt a supercharger or put a cam in it, and having full control over that powertrain is big for a lot of guys. With other configurations, let's take superchargers and turbochargers for example, there is no factory tune. There is no standard US EPA production calibration that you can load in and expect the economy, drivability, reliability, longevity, and all the other things that go along with the OE calibration. With the turbocharger and supercharger, you're pretty much at the tuner's mercy, the way it's going to shift and perform and the reliability, etc. Hybriding, where you're mixing and matching manufactured components. Again, you're going to be slave to a pretty much locked down operating system. While there might be some tweaks you can do here and there, it's nothing like having full access to an unmolested, unmodified powertrain, engine and transmission, the way the manufacturer intended it to be. Recently I took an LT4 to Salt Lake City from Vegas, about 900 miles trip, with a completely stock GM LT4 calibration, and it didn't have a single hiccup, nothing. When it comes to US EPA compliance, they have pretty strict rules, and the general spirit of the US EPA engine change rules are that all the hardware and software from the donor vehicle, and that includes the powertrain, engine and transmission, must be brought over into the new chassis and run in the US EPA certified configuration. And that's exactly what we're doing. Face it, putting a V8 in your JK just makes it fun to drive. It's different than a supercharger and a turbocharger. It doesn't matter what you got, a Hemi, an LS, an LT. They all have decent power and can go over these hills and not struggle. However, the LT1 struggles a little less. The 10-speed transmission works just a little bit better. The high compression and all the other technology in this motor just make it that much better, and it's hard to quantify or explain, but you get in a 10-speed direct injected LT V8 and there's nothing else like it. Now that the LT is coming into its own, if you go to SEMA or look online, there's just so much stuff out there available for these engines. It's like the LS and then the small block before that. It's unlimited what you can do with these engines. Just out of the factory, the LT5's pushing 800 horsepower, and it's not just about the horsepower, it's about the torque of these engines. These LT1s are old hat for us now. I remember just a few years ago, these were cutting edge technology for us, and we were getting the tap shift and cruise control and all the other functions to work. I think other shops are trying to do that now. I'd venture to say we've done well over 100 LTs now, and it's really become easy. The earlier LTs, the 15, 16s, of course, no problem. 17 and 18s, no problem. Now in 19 and 20, GM started changing some stuff up, going to the T93 controller, going to the new L84, L87, where they physically changed the engine and the hardware for the not only controllers but the operating systems and all that. We're going to take this JK on the trail. I have no reservations that it's going to perform excellent off-road, and we will see you in the next video.